Gross national happiness is an expanded notion to measure development, initiated by the last autonomous Buddhist kingdom, Bhutan. The commonly used gross national product solely measures economic factors. Gross national happiness addresses a sustainable environment, well-being and spiritual development. Parallel worldwide movements are pointing to the negative results of globalization. They mostly address one aspect, either the economic, the political or the environmental issue. But gross national happiness addresses the notion of wholeness that is embedded in Bhutan's authentic Buddhist culture. Now that the country is opening its borders, Bhutan could contribute this radical notion for the benefit of the rest of the world. For years, gross national happiness was looked upon as unrealistic or utopian. Economists were astonished to see how Bhutan's gross percentage of per capita income rose from the lowest to the highest position in South Asia. With sustainable environmental policy and biodiversity, Bhutan has been ahead of the West for decades. Since the rise of the new global agenda, the Human Development Index and Agenda 21 of the United Nations, Bhutan receives attention by the World Bank.
I believe that while the philosophy of gross national happiness is inherently Bhutanese, its ideas may have a positive relevance to other nations, communities, or people. In today's world, I feel that there must be some convergence among nations on the idea of what the primary objective of development and progress should be. If we can bring the world to understand and appreciate that GNH is not just rooted in our culture and traditions, but it is in the needs and aspirations of every person, whether in the richest nation, surrounded by skyscrapers and technology, or in the poorest country, working in the fields. The development and economic progress that nations seek should be aimed at helping these individuals realize their common potential for and goals of happiness and contentment.
International scientists and economists come to Bhutan to learn in reciprocity, possibly nurturing a counter-movement to the western direction of burning out the people and burning up the planet.
It was not until recent times that Bhutanese were inclined to mention GNH outside the country. It was a staple for the Bhutanese alone. Even in the country, one could not help but suspect that foreign experts found it to be a utopian idea, not to be taken seriously. It was my perception then that toward the end of what arguably has been the most exciting and progressive century in recorded history, during which human society had undergone unprecedented change socially, economically, and technologically, there was paradoxically a general sense of disillusionment. The threshold to a new millennium had evoked a mood for reflection, introspection, and uneasy contemplation about the future. There were questions about what, amid the wonders in which we live, humanity had truly achieved. All that we have sacrificed at the altar of material advancement to appease insatiable wants had not been in the best interest of furthering human civilization.
I come from the U.S., and the U.S. is sort of the poster child for the consumer culture that's being spread around the world. And I would like the Bhutanese to know in particular that things are particularly bad there in terms of people's frame of mind, their levels of happiness. In America, 1 in 5 children has a mental, emotional, or behavioral disorder, and an estimated 5 million are being given at least one psychiatric drug. I myself find it hard to believe how a child barely old enough to talk can be given psychiatric drugs, but that's what's happening in the US. Stimulants and antidepressant drugs are now being given to American children as young as 2 years old. Since 1995, there's been a nearly 7-fold increase in the number of children younger than 13 requiring antidepressants. There are other signs of breakdown as well. Girls as young as 4 are showing symptoms of anorexia. Boys who are more likely to express emotional problems with violence have been taking it out on their classmates in school. There have been more than 25 school shootings in the last few years, taking the lives of 35 students. The youngest killer was a 6-year-old boy. Suicide is now the 3rd leading cause of death among 15 to 24-year-olds in America. These statistics could go on, but I think you get the point.
When I'm in America, I see among students that I study that every time when they get depressed, they say, "Oh, I'm so depressed today. I want to go and shop in the mall." But I know they don't always have. Every time they get depressed, that I don't think they have money to go and shop in the mall. But that makes them even more in debt, and that makes them even more unhappy. So that is a lack of spirituality. I always think myself, what is surface, way of consoling yourself and making yourself happy. So that's a difference. I see spiritual world and, where there's a lack of spirituality, the way of consoling yourself when you're depressed. So I would never do that. Go to a mall and buy me more clothes, so that will make me more unhappy result.
My country, Japan, is probably the only country in the world that achieved high level of material wealth very quickly. Everyone is pretty much well off equally in my country. But today we have a major social problem of young generation not being able to identify with any value system that will make a people Japanese. It is generating symptoms such as very strange crimes committed by teenagers, murder for pleasure, murder without any motivation. Mental health, measured by all sorts of ways, of children in my country are coming down. In pursuing singularly the betterment of material achievement, my country has forgotten something very, very important, which is that in the long term, what makes a nation secure and remain as a healthy and wholesome nation is not just comfort of material things, but identity with one's own culture, heritage, and value systems that people can share.
Now, economic growth, to get down to cases, is a risk factor, as we say in the social sciences. The hypothesis is that risk of economic growth can be moderated, that is, to be made less dangerous, detoxified by a Buddhist value system. The Buddhist value system, we argue, can be maintained by a universal education based on Buddhist values. Fred Hirsch long ago argued that in America, religious norms were crucial in the preservation of the American social fabric. He argued that religious norms helped to secure values against the the pure utilitarianism of the market. He also argued that as economic growth continued, religious sources of social integration were swamped, and the social fabric began to thin.
People don't even realize today how rapid the change in the United States was from an agrarian society to an industrial society. It was a true revolution and should have, by all rights, caused an enormous amount of social dislocation. It certainly did cause some. But Hirsch's argument is the social fabric was maintained by the religion. That religion and its teachings, especially teachings about social responsibility and compassion for others, certainly very much a part of Christian tradition, was the force that kept the social fabric intact. But he argued that as economic development went on further, that it began to erode religious values, and that that in fact has led to a decline, or what I said in the talk today, a thinning of the social fabric. And that has actually led to a good deal of stress in American culture. One of the indicators, in my opinion, of the stress is the popularity of extreme fundamentalist Christianity, which has popped up in great amount in the past 20 years, to the point where actually the President of the United States adheres to that, and is probably one of his strongest appeals to the public is his extremely, in my opinion, divisive fundamentalism.
Ik ben zelf economisch getraind, en jurist en dat soort zaken. En ik ken de zakenwereld en de manier van denken van veel van de, zeg maar, meer economisch georiënteerde beleidsmakers. Maar ik werk al jaren nu op het vlak van duurzame ontwikkeling. Maar tegelijkertijd heb ik me verdiept in het boeddhisme, die natuurlijk vooral naar de innerlijke mens kijkt. En als het ware een wetenschap is op het gebied van, je zou zeggen, geluk, menselijk geluk.
Now, GDP and conventional economics is based on a particular worldview, on a paradigm. Namely, that matter is the only thing that there really is. Material things. And that mind and consciousness is only a byproduct of matter, namely the body. That was sort of a paradigm that emerged out of the scientific revolution in the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries. GDP in economics is based on that paradigm. There is no consciousness or emotions or feelings or anything is completely outside the scope of economics. It's never been in. Another assumption at that time that became prevalent was the law of what Darwin phrased was the law of the fittest, and it was interpreted as meaning that we are all kind of selfish beings, naturally very competitive, and that things like compassion were only sort of subordinate to competitive nature. Darwin actually didn't mean that. It was Darwin's law referred to the ability of beings to adapt. It was the survival of the fittest was referring to the survival of those who are most adaptable. So that was again a paradigm that we believed reality was, and that we were. Now G&H is taking a very different point of view, namely that consciousness, mind, feeling, emotions, and all the softer stuff like environment and culture, everything that is not material is important. If you look at the literature and all these traditions, from physics to biology to economics, there is a trend to now start looking at consciousness, feelings, emotions, and of course culture and environment, everything. So every scientific discipline is trying to make sense of how to bridge the matter, the old stuff, with the immaterial.
Wat is de wetenschappelijke basis het effect van materiële consumptie op welzijn bijvoorbeeld. Wat creëert werkelijk geluk vanuit een wetenschap gezien. En dan zie je dat er ook heel veel parallellen zijn met het boeddhisme. Omdat het boeddhisme natuurlijk een religie is die per definitie geen dogma's heeft. En gewoon kritische analyse centraal stelt. En daarom ook een dialoog kan hebben met westerse wetenschappen.
Immanuel Kant criticized utilitarianism and specifically brought to bear the idea, very important idea, of the categorical imperative, which I think is quite similar to Buddhist ethics in a place where Western and Asian cultures come together. Human beings for Kant, sentient beings for Buddhists, are to be treated as ends in themselves, not as means to other ends. Meaning is inherent in this model. Buddhism, Damien Cowan recently argued quite persuasively, is incompatible with utilitarianism. Buddhism has a theory of the right that's independent of the theory of individual well-being. Acts are good when they lead toward nirvana and away from samsara. Right and good are not independent, but rightness of an act is determined by ethical motivation, namely generosity, compassion, and wisdom.
Kant's view was that the good has to have meaning, and that he radically differed from utilitarianism. For utilitarianism, the good is simply a kind of calculus of pleasure and pain without any intrinsic meaning. And Kant was rather adamantly opposed to that. I think it was utilitarianism that really gave birth to modern economic theory, which actually is based on the idea that one can quantify the good, and that means that it has to be reduced to commensurable units.
Basically, we have 40 analysts that analyze over 2,000 large companies around the world and give them grades for their environmental and social performance. Then we sell this research, these ratings, to large investors, such as investment banks, pension funds, other financial institutions, who use the research to make socially responsible investing products. The real reason that humanity is grossly unsustainable is system flaws, in large part, that don't hold firms responsible. So if we don't change the economic and political systems that firms operate in, we will never achieve sustainability. For example, in the United States, companies will often seek to go to government and ask to be held less responsible rather than more responsible for their pollution. In other words, they ask to have less restrictions on emissions, say from electric power plants. And then they'll give money to politicians who then vote in support of their positions as part of the campaign finance laws. So this basically prevents the government from holding firms fully responsible. It also compels the government to focus on the short term. So campaign finance and lobbying, I think in the U.S. campaign finance is the biggest problem of any type. Gross national happiness, I think, has the potential to be the most significant advancement in economic theory in the last 150 years. The problem with GNP, gross national product, is that we only measure one thing, economic growth, and we equate that with social well-being. But of course, economic growth is a means to an end. But when the only thing that we're measuring is that means, that's what we focus on. And you can see in many ways that economic growth is not a good measure of social well-being. Economic growth, or GNP, counts many negatives as positive. For example, putting people in jail, cleaning up environmental disasters, people taking antidepressants, illness, all those things make GNP go up, which supposedly means society's getting better when in fact it's getting worse.
The West has mastered technology and organization to an enormous extent. But a philosopher named Jürgen Habermas, who is still living and working, has criticized the Western model because he says that the technical and organizational interests have eclipsed, and made seem irrelevant what he calls emancipatory interests. We are actually people who make knowledge, and knowledge making can be for various purposes. We in the West have emphasized making knowledge for technical and organizational ends. Habermas argues that we need to concern ourselves more now with making knowledge for emancipation.
One of my graduate students and I developed what we call the liberative model of adult development. And we were specifically contrasting that model of development with the dominant models that are actually still dominant. One that has to do with stages of human development, fixed stages that everyone goes through universally without exception. And clearly there are no such universal stages, and we set out to expose that fact, not original with us by any means. But we had an alternative, and that was the liberative model. The other model we were criticizing was what we call the sociogenic model, which simply says that adults don't really develop in any sort of teleological way. They simply adopt different social roles in accordance with the demands of their age and place in society. And that took really the whole developmental issue out of development, and we objected to that as well. So the liberative model said that the real purpose of adult development, if there is such a thing as adult development, must have some sort of meaning. And we felt that the universal or universalizable meaning of adult development was exactly this emancipatory knowledge-making interest that Habermas had talked about.
The main exercise in understanding and pursuing gross national happiness is really to construct a society which has the potential and possibility of providing contentment to all its citizens throughout their life. Of course, as soon as you say this kind of thing, it means that we are concerned with generation of happiness at a very large macro societal level. That means it is no longer a narrow individual approach to maximizing his or her happiness. It's really about creating macro conditions or enabling environment for happiness. That means we are talking about right kind of policies, right kind of procedures, or right kind of structures, within which people find themselves happier rather than not happy. That is the difference. I mean, it is really about construction and designing of a society where the opportunities and potential for happiness is much higher.
The value system that is embodied in Bhutan's gross national happiness, such as compassion, is fundamentally universal. My understanding of Christianity doesn't contradict with values of gross national happiness. I mean, the way that Jesus Christ lived his life is a compassionate life, no? When you think about values that are embodied in G&H, such as compassion, humility, those are the values that make good leaders. Good leaders are not loud, active people who order others around. Good leaders are people who are humble, know one's own place, but have a vision, and through one's own conduct can gain the respect of others, and have the ear to really listen to what people of different views are saying, with compassion. And Bhutan is one of the few countries where nation's leaders, not just His Majesty the King, but leaders in government and in private sector and in villages, do tend to embody this very strong leadership quality. And I think that comes basically from this value system that just happened to be embodied in the Buddhist belief, but I think it is also very possible in other countries.
I'm executive director of GPI Atlantic, and for the last 7 years we've been constructing better measures of progress, measures that include social, economic, and environmental realities. We're trying to measure some non-material conditions of well-being. Our conventional measures only measure materialist criteria, how much we spend, how much we buy, how much we produce. But we're measuring maybe some non-material things, the quality of the environment, health, educational attainment. These things are not measurable always in dollars and cents. For example, when we measure the health of the population, so that's one of our criteria. A healthy population is more conducive to happiness than a population which is suffering from preventable illnesses or dying prematurely. So we demonstrated in a very practical way that preventable, avoidable illnesses, just due to a small number of risk factors like smoking, overweight, lack of physical activity, cost Nova Scotia $500 million a year in avoidable healthcare costs. So when the government of Nova Scotia saw that, they decided to put a lot of effort into improving the health of the population. They established a new office of health promotion under a separate minister, not just caring for the sick, but also trying to improve the health of the population. So in a case like that, the government of Nova Scotia looked at our indicators and our results and our measurements and said, oh, we have to do something about this. You know, it's a gradual process because governments think in terms of budgets and dollars and cents. So I think if we don't use that language, they won't pay attention to us, you know? So I think we have to engage with government, business, from where they're coming from. It's the only way to create a dialogue and a conversation. For example, we put a value on volunteer work. That's ignored in the economic measures of progress because there's no money exchanged. But what are we really measuring? We're really measuring people's generosity, their caring for each other, people looking after the sick, the elderly, the disabled, youth in need, on a volunteer basis. So that's one of our key indicators. So on the one hand, we do put a dollar value on it. We say, look, they're contributing $2 billion worth of services a year. And they say, oh, $2 billion. So they pay attention. But what we're really pointing to is the generosity and the caring that are behind voluntary work.
We aim to improve quality of life by promoting innovative solutions that challenge mainstream thinking in economic, environmental and social issues. We're radical, and that's our identity. We basically try and put things onto the political agenda Once they get on the agenda, we sort of slightly let go of them. So our task as an organisation is to bring things into the political realm. That's how we see ourselves strategically. We work in partnership. That's really important. We work with local authorities, local government, with civil society, with organisations. We don't just sit back and think by ourselves. We put ourselves out into the community. And we put people and planet first. So we're very inspired by social justice, by environmental sustainability, and now it's in our remit that we're inspired by well-being as well. We have lots of projects which are about regeneration, and one is time banks, which is in areas which are very poor, where people are time rich but financially poor. They exchange time, so they give into a system, a sort of barter system, 1 hour of their time, and in exchange they can have an hour of someone else's time. And one of the wonderful things, well, two of the wonderful things about the system is that the idea is that you put into the system something that you love doing. So the input is with love. So an example might be a woman on a council estate who she's quite socially isolated, but she loves her animals, she loves her pets. And she can walk other people's dogs or look after their pets while they're out at work or busy. And so she does something she loves. And the amazing thing with the system is that people actually put in more hours than they take out. So that they actually are enjoying, they're actually getting more benefit from giving than they are from taking back out. And I think that's an example of an alternative way than a financial way of enhancing people's lives. The concept of G&H, gross national happiness, is a way of articulating what the purpose of society should be about. And really that's what my work at New Economics Foundation is about. It's about how we can bring indicators and whole ways of thinking about that, realign public policy with what its purpose should be, because its purpose has been rather lost in the last few decades, focusing more on economic goals than on human goals.
If you look at the circumstances of the world as a whole, the world needs an alternative path of development that's not based just on material greed or accumulating more possessions. That tendency is actually, you could say, destroying the world in terms of our natural resources, our forests, our greenhouse gas emissions. I think we don't have a choice to continue on the way that we're currently going in the world in terms of environmental destruction, poverty, hunger in the world. We can't continue in that way. So I think the example that Bhutan is showing of an alternative path forward based on human development and care for the environment, the world should pay attention. Our regular measures tell us how much income we're producing, but they tell us nothing about how that income is shared or distributed. And our economic growth measures make no distinction between what's growing. Anything can make the economy grow. More crime, more pollution, more natural disasters, more fossil fuel combustion can all make the economy grow. So we actually need better measures of progress in order to send accurate signals to policymakers. So when you say, is there hope? I would say, I don't know if there's hope. I do know that there's no choice but to go this direction. This is the only way that the economy of the 21st century could possibly provide a decent existence for humankind on Earth.
Entering an era of television, seductive advertising campaigns and international trade, Bhutan faces the challenge to protect its authentic culture.
This is our village, and only few houses, children have moved away to Thimphu for government service, but most of our village people are still here. My only worry is, the new settlements are encroaching, deeper and deeper into the community. So this can really destabilize all the community, those norms and values and culture, all that. I think those days we virtually knew every family member with their house location. You even knew how many cows the other family has, and how many pigs they have. My mother and can identify the never speak. This is never speak. This is our pig. But now you can't even count the number of houses here. I mean, it's almost like a city now. There's a little bit of a sort of tension, I think, which might reconstitute the whole culture, the whole community cohesion. The social, the network that together is feeling. I think it might dilute this factor.
Yeah, they go in there. From Paro, there are five doctors. So whenever I come home, everybody will come. So I can't come for holiday to Paro because I'll get more work, and yeah, she's becoming more competent this time. So let's do that. Are shoot it? Yeah, she is my aunt. My mother is my mother's sister. They live together, and they like to live in a small place down there. So they have a living room and they have a bedroom, and it's near their water source, near the toilet. So they are much comfortable down there. So they think that these young children should try to stay, to live up to the past, because they should have some flavor or fragrance of the past. Otherwise, they they might feel a bit lost. But she's saying that, but I think it is a little beyond our control.
아니 슬레이트 복 왔으는 아니 시민은 저는 럭출한 반응 토픽 아니요. I'm very worried that, see now first layer of protection is gone, the slate is broken, and now there's the raw the stone there. My auntie thinks that the children has destroyed these boys who are naughty boys. I'm telling my mom, aunt, that we should, as soon as possible, try to enclose this as a priority, because I don't want this raw thing to be exposed. Then somebody can go inside and very vulnerable. So
what is inside?
Oh, there will be some relics and scriptures, holy scriptures, relics. I think this is probably 100 years old, more than that probably. So. This may be one of the last few stupas that we have probably in Paro now. And it was built during a time when my family was at the peak of their economy or whatever, that they basically had a very important role there. So I believe that there will be something very important in this. So we are happy that this is not desecrated. My worry is somebody in the village might one day get lured to open this up and take away some of the relics. Because if this is gone, then the whole soul of this is gone. The charm of this, all this. Now we are building a new one, but if these are gone, new ones can be built anytime, but we can never get this back. So I'm very worried. I'm telling my brother, I don't know where he's gone now.
What is the importance for you?
This is something like a symbol that we have inherited from our ancestors, and this is the link between the past and the future. So something like this desecrated, it's like we are losing your soul. And when you lose your soul, in Bhutan we believe that you are no more. You don't have your life force. The life force is your soul.
You said there's one of the last churtans around, but we see them everywhere. Are you telling us that all these are desecrated?
I think most of them, especially if they are isolated, because those people can easily open that up in the night. Then they want to sell it. They will sell it in the international market, and and it's a quick money. It's an easy way to make money. You have to go with a crowbar one night and in an isolated place. You just dig a hole and then remove whatever is inside.
So why do you think for centuries it has never been stolen? Why do you think it's happening lately?
I think it's part of what you call as opening up to the world. Then we now this monetization of the economy and the lure of this modern material things that you need money to do many things. And because until then people had a lot of reverence to Buddhism, and also they didn't need so much money. It was almost bartering. You barter rice for meat and cheese for this or that. So money was not a factor. Suddenly then they found that money can do many things. I mean, you can buy this, make a new house and buy a car and all that. So this is the easiest way to make money. I mean, because it fetches a lot of money in the international market. Bhutanese, especially relics and religious artifacts, if they trade or do anything, even if it's from your own house, you are not supposed to sell outside the country. So you'll have a life sentence. So they know that, but I think people still take a chance. And also a lot of people are also getting now a bit confused with so many changes, and they think that why not take a chance and see what happens.
Jumulari, what do you see? Jumulari peak. Yeah, siapa ini betul? Nah, pakai. Let's go into this one. Okay, now it's a slideshow. Aku.
One of the reasons why we have survived as a unique people, as a unique country, has a lot to do with the fact that we are a unique identity. And we attach tremendous value to this. We have continued to strive to ensure its preservation. And therefore, even as Bhutan becomes an active member of the global society, the global community, it is our intention that we survive. Bhutan will change. Bhutan is a dynamic society, and we will adapt to new ideas, to changes that are useful for our own advancement. At the same time, those aspects of our culture, of our value systems, which we know have contributed to our survival, which we know will contribute towards our further progress, we will preserve. We look at our own culture as basically a tool. A tool, culture is nothing but a tool fashioned by man for its own advancement. And those aspects of culture which are no longer contributing to man's advancement must be abandoned, and new cultures and new traditions must be developed. And so you'll see that Bhutan is changing. But Bhutan is changing within a paradigm, within a set of value systems, which will ensure that we will continue to be different, and yet a very constructive, a very harmonious part of the global society.
다 배주가. 다 떼야 돼.
Kasih alu tim sini ya. Kau dah alu sen alu dia jawab dia. Ni, an chap jawab dia. Gochi dia ni.
Na lute.
Kan jam sakit bayu. Tadi ni jarang mati benda. Saya cuti ko jam ni jarang mati sah. Na cerna tu masuk bete. Ani men saya. There's one generation, and they never went to school. Nor did they even went to a monastic school. So they absolutely do not know how to read and write. But they have learned by rote some mantras that they can recite through their gurus or their teachers. And then my generation, I have gone through Western education, and then I'm also to conform to their wishes, because they don't like us to be completely taking up the Western sort of manners or thing. And my children are growing up in the television age with mobile and all this, and their perspective to life is quite different. For many Bhutanese, I think we think that we are actually spoiling this generation, because I think problem with us is my generation is we really grew up in the village, but a hard life, but we were happy. It was hard. It was harsh. For example, we didn't have shoes in winter when you go up this mountain to pick up firewood, It was hard. And I think that sort of stays in our mentality. So I at least want my children not to have this same suffering. I mean, it's something like a sacrifice I made. But then in the process, then my children are getting spoiled. They take for granted everything,
That's a pocket transaction if I ever saw one. Oh, yeah. Right.
Ethnic identity and national dilemma, very important for Bhutan. Yeah. I'm just looking for some floppies to show some pictures.
With respect to the impact of television and the media, I agree with you that if the viewer is not completely discerning and is not mindful of what he is watching, one may be engulfed gradually, and one's standards and values might be redefined by it towards the standards espoused by the media and the market and the consumer culture. If you assume that they do transmit a different kind of values, and they do redefine the standards and values of society, they can, in the long run, pose a great challenge and a threat to the local culture. What is the way out? I think that the way out, at least in principle, is to increase the local content of your own programs and intensify your own effort for promoting and preserving cultural heritage. In principle, the digital technology can be a great servant towards that. You can digitize, store, and disseminate it in a very powerful way, whatever you think should be done by way of preserving one's own culture. I hope that the sense of preserving and promoting one's culture is taken much more seriously, and the local writers, local craftsmen, oral traditions are revived with the help of this digital technology.
Tanks are about to. Channel V's loops after hours. Storm takes you for a while.
Excuse me, one of those was for arson. I'm telling you, you're making a big mistake. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not.
Yes, you are. He didn't do it. According to this citation...
There are so many things in the Western culture has to offer. Good things, education, the pedagogy, curriculum, whatever we can copy. But the thing is that we, first of all, our younger generation pick up is their stereotyping of the West, from the media. So we get carried away by that. So that's what I'm concerned about. So in that regard, I have a feeling that our teachers in the school systems, our parents, our older generation, spiritual teachers, has a very big role. Our policymakers have to figure out at this point, how to guide our younger generation.
I think I have reasons to believe that we will survive. We will survive as the culture that we have. The only thing is the culture that we have now might become a little more diluted or reconstituted. So that can be the problem. I don't think we will absolutely lose all our culture. I think because we have this conscious effort to try to maintain it. So I think to that extent, I think we will survive. But I think that a little bit of influences will be there. I don't think we can escape it. So somewhere down the line, we need to develop the balance, what we want, what we really do not want. I mean, we can't completely avoid change. I think it's not possible. At the same time, we should not have such a drastic or dramatic change that everything gets out of hand. I mean, this is happening in many parts of the world. So luckily, most of the Bhutanese who have a chance to go abroad, they have seen, how it is to change so rapidly that I think we will all make a conscious effort to see that we will change, but change gradually, and something that we can handle, not get overwhelmed by the change and go out of hand.
Actually, some recent research has indicated that people who are religious actually are better for economic development than people who are not, which might bode well for Bhutan and G&H, because it would seem that people who have morality, compassion, discipline, conscientiousness, all the things that the religion actually promotes and teaches, will actually be good for even GDP. So I don't think there's certainly no contradiction between G&H and GDP, and they probably will facilitate each other very nicely.
Things are constantly changing. Our ends are subject to change. It means fundamentally that nothing is important in itself and of itself. And democracy is not important in and of itself. The parliament is not important in and of itself. G&H is not important in and of itself. It's only an instrument and means, and everything is impermanent and is changing. That means that we have chance to direct this change, because that is subject to human will. Everything is temporary, and we have to take advantage of that temporariness and impermanence to direct change. And all changes must be directed towards in people, first of all, in relative hardship conditions, meaning dissolving their stress, dissolving their suffering, dissolving their hardships and miseries. Once you dissolve this kind of physical conditions, then one can talk really about elevating their mind and ethics to be more aware of interdependence. You see, never to think of oneself as some absolute entity somewhere existing without regard to others and the environment. We all are always a branch and a product of the environment around us. That includes other people, that includes other creatures, that includes other plants. So there are no dichotomies, us and them, nature and human beings. Environmental degradation, but material affluence on the human side. This cannot exist as polar dichotomies, because this must be, if environment is degraded, it must be caused by you, whose consciousness has changed quite a bit, whose values have changed a bit. So one must see it as a cause and effect, interdependent situation, all involved in some kind of pattern of relationship.
I sense that the silent majority of the world, in every single country, want compassionate, want economic and social and political system that is compassionate, that enables human beings' maximum potential. I have seen such things happen at the community level, even district level, and in the case of Bhutan, at the country level, when situations are conducive. So it is just a matter of all of us working together, pulling in some good leaders around the world. In our way of thinking, I think the responsibility of many of us who's been blessed with good education and certain level of material comfort is to be active and shake up the world a little bit.
Yeah, you get it.